too late.
The Browns are the most dysfunctional team in the NFL. Period.
No.
Full stop.
The narrative around Shedeur Sanders was he could not play in structure and he was a one-throw type guy, boom or bust deep, right? But guess what? He shows you on film. The next week he's able to come out here and throw the ball on time. The next week we talk about running backwards. The next week he shows he can step up in the pocket. Cosell talked about it. There's multiple. I'm not the only one to say it. Chase Daniels talks about it. Multiple quarterbacks talk about the progression. So my thing is, we can sit here and bring up a number that we looked up and said, hey, he's the worst quarterback of all time. But if you watching the game, nobody that plays the game of football, watch the game of football, or all the people that talk about it is not going to say that Shedeur Sanders is the worst quarterback they've ever seen.
The Cleveland sports media world just went nuclear. Jason Lloyd walked in, armed with analytics, cold, hard numbers meant to shut down the Shedeur Sanders conversation for good. But G. Bush had a different plan. This wasn't a debate. This was an absolute demolition. The Browns fell 23-20 to the Buffalo Bills. Another tight game, another loss, another week watching Cleveland sit at 3-11, staring straight at a top 2 draft pick. And the question that's been tearing through this franchise for weeks finally boiled over. Is Shedeur Sanders the answer at quarterback?
This century, by dropback per EPA, he's worse than Jamarcus
Okay,
Russell.
explain that. Like, I know we've talked about it before.
It
but for
takes
those that
into
might not know
account
that
down and
number.
distance, field position, home or away, time and score. It is the most all-encompassing metric that
Does
you
it
can
take
use
into
to
account
measure a
his
quarterback.
teammates?
That's not exaggeration. That's not some hot take nonsense. According to Jason, that's pure data, the kind that should end conversations before they start. But G. Bush, he wasn't buying a word of it. Like the video if you love Shedeur. Comment SS Rocks if you want to see Shedeur win. We'll see you next time. Peace. G. Bush came out firing with a message that struck at the core of the analytics revolution. Numbers don't tell you everything. He countered with something that hit home for anyone who's watched a struggling team try to develop a young quarterback. Context is king.
Keep looking. Jackson Dart, I think he threw for like 32 yards yesterday. Like, maybe that was earth-shattering. Go look at Cam Ward and what his numbers are. His numbers have not been great the entire year.
This is where the fireworks started, because G. Bush wasn't just defending Shedeur, he was dismantling the whole idea of evaluating a fifth-round rookie behind the league's worst offensive line with no weapons in a broken system. The offensive line ranked dead last. The receivers get the worst separation in the entire league. Quinshon Judkins, the starting running back, went down injured, and somehow Shedeur is supposed to elevate all of that? G. Bush didn't hold back. You can't judge a quarterback in isolation. Here's where this debate gets fascinating. Jason Lloyd went all in on EPA, expected points added, as the gold standard for measuring quarterback performance. For anyone unfamiliar, EPA tracks how much a quarterback's play increases or decreases their team's expected points on every snap. It factors in field position, down and distance, game situation, the whole picture. By that standard, Shedeur Sanders is historically terrible, the worst since 2000, according to Jason's numbers. But G. Bush came back with a reality check that shook the entire panel.
We be sitting here and we be watching people all the time. I just watched the game Jackson Dart play, one of the worst games I've ever seen.
But G, I don't understand what Jackson Dart has to do with anything. We're not discussing whether Jackson Dart should be the starting quarterback.
No. What I'm saying to you is, I'm not talking about discussing. We look at EPA stats and numbers in a.
EPA doesn't account for scheme. It doesn't factor in the talent around you. It ignores coaching quality. It doesn't consider that your offensive coordinator might be on his way out. And most critically, it completely ignores development. This is where G. Bush really turned up the heat. He made a point that Shedeur's supporters have been making for weeks. The goalposts keep shifting. First, the knock on Shedeur was that he couldn't play within structure, that he was just a one-read, deep ball thrower who couldn't run a pro-style offense. Then he proved he could play within structure. Against the Bills, his average depth of target was only 1.9 yards, the second lowest in the past 2 years. Everything was quick, underneath, on schedule.
The goalpost in the beginning was could not play in structure. What I'm saying is the narrative around Shedeur Sanders was he could not play in structure and he was a one-throw type guy, boom or bust deep, right? But guess what? He shows you on film. The next week, he's able to come out here and throw the ball on time. The next week, we talk about running backwards. The next week, he shows he can step up in the pocket. Cosell talked about it. There's multiple. I'm not the only one to say it. Chase Daniels talks about it. Multiple quarterbacks talk.
So what changed? The narrative did. Now it's all about EPA, about efficiency, about whether he's a top 10 quarterback, a ridiculous standard for a fifth-round rookie in his fifth career start. And G. Bush called it exactly what it was. If you keep changing the measuring stick, no quarterback could ever meet expectations. But here's where things took an even sharper turn. G. Bush shifted to something Jason Lloyd actually agreed with. The Browns are in an impossible situation no matter what path they choose.
The Browns ain't even really in no position to take a quarterback if they wanted to. A quarterback in the same line and no weapons, you think you're going to get more than 4 wins? No, you're not getting more than 4 wins.
This is the nightmare scenario. If Andrew Berry stays as GM, and all reports say he will, he's staring down a brutal choice. Draft a quarterback at number 2 overall, and you're pouring all your draft capital into one position, while your offensive line stays a disaster and your receiving core remains empty. Stick with Shedeur and build around him, and you're betting the franchise on a fifth-round pick who ranks among the worst quarterbacks statistically in modern history. It's lose-lose, and G. Bush laid it out in devastating detail. In the middle of all this, the panel made a detour that actually exposed the real problem with the Cleveland Browns organization. They talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers have had 3 head coaches in the last 55 years. They've made the playoffs 22 consecutive seasons, despite mediocre quarterback play for stretches. Jason Lloyd dropped a stat that should turn every Browns fan's stomach. The Browns have only drafted a quarterback in the top 20 picks twice in the last 55 years. Tim Cush, Micah Bayfield. That's it. And both got the Browns to the playoffs.
Too late.
The Browns are the most dysfunctional team in the NFL. Period.
No.
Full stop. And yet people think that they're going to be the team that can take a late round pick and develop him. They can buck the odds and do something that very few other teams can do. No, they have to be handed a pretty close to finished product to have any chance of success. And that is not Shedeur.
That's the brutal truth. The Browns don't develop quarterbacks. They don't develop anybody. They're a permanently broken organization, constantly chasing miracle fixes instead of building something sustainable. And that's why the Shedeur debate matters so much. This isn't just about one player. It's about whether this franchise has learned anything from decades of failure. Let's get back to the heart of this argument, because ultimately it comes down to one fundamental question. What do you trust more, the eye test or the numbers? Jason Lloyd trusts the numbers, and honestly, they're brutal. Shedeur's EPA is historically awful. His touchdown-to-interception ratio is concerning. His performance in clutch moments has been lacking. But G. Bush trusts what he sees on tape, and what he sees is a quarterback showing steady growth, who's learned to navigate the pocket, who's displayed accuracy on deep throws, who's led the team in rushing 3 straight weeks.
When you are evaluating a quarterback on a bad team, you have to take what you can and extrapolate and say, can I get better with this guy? Can this guy get better? Does he show me the tools and traits, whether it's his acumen throwing the football, or does the team rally around him, that I could say with improvements here, here, and here, and a new play caller and what we want to do?
This is the heart of the disagreement. Jason sees a finished product that doesn't measure up. G. Bush sees a developmental prospect with real potential. And here's the truth. Both could be right. So where does that leave us? The Browns are picking in the top 2. They've got a shot at drafting Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, 2 quarterbacks considered more NFL-ready than anyone on Cleveland's roster. Jason Lloyd's stance is clear-cut. If you're picking number 2, you must take a quarterback. The odds of finding a franchise QB outside the top 10 are slim, and the Browns have proven they can't develop late-round picks. G. Bush's position is just as clear. You can't keep hitting the reset button. You can't keep burning first-round picks on quarterbacks while ignoring the offensive line, the receivers, the entire foundation needed to actually win games.
You look at the people in front of them, that goes into it. The offensive line is the worst in the league statistically, and that's not even debatable. When you take a look at the receiving core, they get the least amount of separation. They don't catch the ball when it's open.
And that's the impossible corner the Browns have backed themselves into, because both arguments hold weight. The reality? This franchise is so fundamentally broken that it doesn't matter who they draft. Until they fix the culture, until they build sustainable infrastructure, until they stop making catastrophic decisions at the top, they'll keep wasting talent and destroying careers. Shedeur Sanders might be the answer. He might not be. But the real problem isn't at quarterback. It's the organization that's been failing quarterbacks for 3 decades. Nothing changes until everything changes. And Cleveland fans, they know that better than anyone.